Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We live in a strange world of paradoxes, and the people who cry about a certain thing are themselves responsible for that. Al Gore, the high priest of global warming and pollution, used to always travel by special aircraft and in a cavalcade of cars, and that too limousines. I discussed it with him when he visited Toronto. But anyway, we today are more concerned with pollution, and that's a big bugbear. And anything wrong, whether it's heat or storm, a tornado, or a pandemic, the first guilty thing is pollution. And that's rightly to so to some extent. But again we go gaga when some billionaire travels a few kilometers up in the space, a few hours, and then sufficient to excite the Johnnies up in the television stations and the guys sitting in the newspaper offices. Pages and pages are written and hours of sound bites are devoted. We are made to fear pollution because that leads to disease, hastens climate change. But these trips into space by billionaires, extolled by the politicians and the media, mesmerizes us. What a paradox. Are you aware that one rocket launch produces up to 300 tons of carbon dioxide in upper atmosphere? Now when I say upper atmosphere, I mean in space where it can remain for years. If it's near the Earth, maybe the carbon sinkholes will absorb it, the trees will absorb it. But once it's in the space, it's going to be there for years, if not for millennia. 2 weeks back, Virgin Galactic took Richard Branson past the edge of the space, roughly about 86 kilometers up. It was part of a competitive space race with Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos, who later on made a similar journey last Tuesday. Both Branson and Bezos are very wealthy businessmen, and they hope to vastly expand their number of people in space. Branson said, "We are here to make space more accessible to all. Welcome to the dawn of new space age." And bloggers, writers, editors pounced on it as the birds of prey as carrion. And everybody, as I said earlier, was gaga on this exploit of Richard Branson. So much so that the people have started buying tickets to space. Companies like SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Space Adventures, they are all motivated by the huge profits that are likely to emerge from space tourism. So make it more common. But then these are not the only two billionaires. There is a third billionaire, the Japanese billionaire, Yusaku Maezawa. Now, Yusaku Maezawa spent an undisclosed sum of money with SpaceX in 2018 for a possible future private trip around the moon and back. And then this June again, before Branson and Bezos' flights, an anonymous space lover paid $28 million to fly on Blue Origin's New Shepard with Bezos. Later on, of course, he backed out. due to scheduling conflict, but the payment is there. Now, the launch of this new private space industry that is cultivating space travel, tourism, and popular use comes at a huge, incalculable environmental cost. And I'm amazed that all those apologies for ecology are mum on that. I have not heard a single word from people like Al Gore criticizing it, from Justin Trudeau saying that anybody who wants to go to space shall have to pay, say, $1 million each for the benefit of going to the space. No, nobody's quiet. Nobody's speaking. Everybody's dumb and mute. But yes, they are saying, well, this is a giant leap. They forget to add giant leap for pollution. Now, these environmental costs, when they are calculated, they are shocking. When rockets are launched into space, they remain a huge amount of propellants to make it out of the Earth's atmosphere. It's not an easy job. For example, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket used kerosene oil. NASA uses liquid hydrogen in the new space launch system, and liquid hydrogen is not that polluting. But the private industry, why should they spend on something which they can save? So these fuels, especially kerosene, emits a variety of substances into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide, chlorine, and other chemicals. Now, some people say that carbon emissions from the rockets are small compared with the aircraft industry. But they forget that they are increasing at 5.6% per year. And if you run a simulation, as was done by Professor Marias in University College London, for 10 years she did it, and then she said that this is going to be tremendous. They take only one thing, the total pollution. Now, imagine a long-haul plane flight produces only 3 tons of carbon dioxide per passenger. On the other side, a rocket launch would release 300 tons of carbon dioxide. Now, the first one in the carbon dioxide, the plane, long-haul plane, the total exhaust of the pollutants is spread, are covered, are divided between 200 to 300 passengers. Here, it is 4 or so passengers. So, it doesn't need to grow much more. We, as I usually say, lies, damn lies are strategies. We suppress something. And dividing the pollutant into 300 and dividing the pollutant into 4 makes hell of a difference. Right now, I agree that the number of the rocket launches and rocket flights is very small. For example, in 2020, last year, there were 114 attempted orbital launches in the world. And that is NASA's assessment. Airline industry had 100,000 flights each day on an average. But, again in the second difference, the emissions from the rockets are emitted right into the upper atmosphere, which means they are there for a long time, period of 5 years or even more. Even the water injected into the upper atmosphere, where it can form cloud, according to the scientists, has warming impact. What happens is, when the water is there in the atmosphere, it does not become a filter, but it becomes a transmitter according to the scientists. And it increases the possibility of heating up the atmosphere. Closer to the ground, all fuels emit huge amount of heat. And not only the warming is there, but they add ozone to the troposphere. It acts like a greenhouse gas and retains heat. So it's not only transmitting heat, it's retaining GHG, greenhouse gases, and heat. In addition to carbon dioxide, the fuels like kerosene and methane also produce soot. And the atmosphere, the ozone layer can be destroyed by the combination of elements from burning fuels. Already the one ozone hole and the world was crying a lot. Imagine the number of the ozone holes would be there, whether they would be holes or they would be streams. While there are a number of environmental impacts resulting from the launch of rockets, the depletion of the stratosphere and the ozone therein is most concerning. New Zealand Space Agency's senior policy advisor Jessica Dalla says that this is the worst pollution that can ever be there. Space Policy and Strategic Institute gave another report, and they compared the space emission problem to that of the space debris. And those space debris create an existential risk for the world. As things are today, the launch vehicle emissions presented distinctive echo of the space of the debris problem. Rocket engine exhaust emitted into stratosphere during the orbit adversely impacts the global atmosphere. And as a matter of fact, the extent of damage, according to scientists, is so huge that it beats all transportation on the earth, whether it's surface transport, railways, ships, or aircraft. There's a new market estimate that the global suborbital transportation and space market is likely to reach $2.58 billion in 2031. That's in one decade. And the next decade will see a growth of 17.15% each year. In the past, most space transport has been focused on cargo supplies to the International Space Station and some satellite launch services. Now, focus has shifted to in-space transportation, planetary exploration, crewed missions, suborbital transportation, and space tourism. We see the several companies, as I said, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, they are focusing on developing platforms. And these platforms like rocket-powered suborbital vehicles, they'll enable the industry to carry out suborbital transportation and space tourism. Now imagine the money that is being spent on the space technology. With doubtful results, but definite results as far as pollution is concerned, as far as global warming is concerned, that if the same money is invested here on the planet, and the planet is ravaged by wildfires we are seeing in Alberta, in US and California, make life better on our planet, where heat waves and the climate disasters are becoming frequent, would that not be better? Is anyone, either in the government hierarchy or the politicals, alarmed that the billionaires are having their own space race? At the same time, when record-breaking heat waves are sparking a fire-breathing dragon on clouds. Not only there, but even the sea creatures are being cooked to death. The former US Labor Secretary Robert Reed's tweet last week interested me. And in that tweet, he lambasted the billionaires going into space, promoting space, and also to the government for not making rules that these are taxing them heavily. If, say, $1 billion or $1 million fine is paid, are levied on each, you can be sure their activities may not stop, but they'll be reduced considerably. I agree. There is excitement to the new development in space. I agree that adventure and the charm and the mystique of space travel is there. But can we not be responsible for while doing something exciting? Should we not use caution as space tourism industry grows? And currently there are no international rules around the kinds of fuels used. Why not make it obligatory on them to use liquid hydrogen or renewable sun energy? Sun energy would be easy, much easier and much cheaper for them as well, and it will save the world. We have no regulation regarding rocket emissions. We have, EU 17, EU 12, EU starting with 12, then 17, 21 rules for the cars. We have emission rules for the aircraft. But we have no emission rules for the rockets. Why not? That today is a time to act. And the time to act is when the billionaires are buying their tickets for the space. Any delay in making the rules and implementing them is being accessory to the crime. And what is shocking is that the scientists are also not, barring a few exceptions, crying a lot. And media, as we know always, is a hangers-on on these billionaires. Their livelihood depends on these billionaires. So they would always be singing praise. But should the political leaders not have the vision? Should the intellectuals and the scientists not stand up and say, stop it now, because tomorrow may not be possible to control this Frankenstein that is being unleashed? Shall we act and save the space and the world from a disaster, the ecological disaster, which this space tourism is promising? Let's hope so, but I'm not very sanguine. Thank you.